be sharing my screen. Okay, here we go. So thank you all for the invitation, and I would like to say hi to all attendees to this session. And then I'll be talking about aerobic preparation for intermittent Olympic sports. And our agenda for today is I will be talking about the historical context of aerobic preparation. I expect to make history a bit more engaging because I created the interactive timeline. So I will share this material after the session. Then we'll be heading to testing for prescription, how we can gather data to prescribe training. And if I really make it, I expect that everyone after this session will be able to test their athletes. And if I really make it, after testing the attendees, they will be ready to also prescribe training. That is interesting. I don't want you to feed your database with your testing data. I want you to use your data to prescribe training for your athletes. That's the main point. And then talking about prescription at a glance, to be really quickly, I will not dive into really much on it. I will also give some hints on how to prescribe sport-specific drills for aerobic improvement. So I hope you can achieve this goal by the end of this talk. So as aerobic training is such a very big topic, I will focus on meaningfulness statements and not precise information, because we'll be talking about many intermittent sports. So I want everyone to have a broader view over aerobic training instead of understanding the nitty-gritty details about preparation. So if you want to know more, you can contact me after the presentation. So starting with the timeline that I created, I know there is a lot of information, but there are two main points in which we have to focus in this timeline. The first one is we have the 60s. The 60s is like a period where the articles, the paper started to be published about aerobic preparation, mainly about interval training. And aerobic preparation nowadays really boils down to interval training. That is a specific way to develop the aerobic performance of athletes. And here, I will quote two main methods during my talk. That is, here in Christensen, there is a yellow star because I highlighted this publication because it's very important for aerobic preparation in intermittent sports. It is a very short kind of interval training, right? And we will be using it to prescribe. After talking about this kind of preparation, about this methodology, I will be also talking about this work here from Martin Boucher. It's a fitness test, aerobic fitness test called 3015, and it's a really good tool for assessment. I know a lot of you guys might know this kind of test from Bangsbo, the yo-yo test. They are the most spread nowadays tests for aerobic prescription, but I hope to give you good knowledge and good hints to replace this kind of assessment for the 3015 test. And I will provide you with more information as we go through this talk. Okay, so I've seen an increasing number of sports recently adopting aerobic prescription and aerobic assessment. One example here is the Indian cricket team adopted in 2017 the yo-yo test, for instance. And now it's required that they perform this test and they have to attain a certain level of performance in order to be selected. Quite interesting. Also, 2018, 3 years ago only, the Indian women's hockey team players acing in the yo-yo test. They also are being tested, and perhaps this data is providing practitioners with fruitful information for our training prescription. But not only in India, we also have the case of Australian football included the yo-yo test in their combined test protocols. There is written yo-yo intermittent recovery test 1. There are 4 types of this test, but let's stay with the concept of the yo-yo tests in mind. And last but not least, we have the Singapore's Professional Football League replacing an old continuous running test, 2.4K running test, with the yo-yo intermittent recovery test in 2018 too. So, but what do these sports have in common that they are sharing the same test? What do they want to test aerobic performance? So first, they want to increase the anaerobic threshold. So in order to prescribe training, they do this kind of assessment for better prescription and increase anaerobic threshold. And by increasing anaerobic threshold, you have a decrease of overall fatigue over your session when you compare the same absolute workload. It's very interesting. You're improving your resistance. And by improving your resistance, your coach is allowed to increase the training load. So we have a cascade of positive effects by improving your aerobic performance. And also, when you increase the training load in a wiser way, you mitigate injury. So you have an improvement in performance and you have a lower in risk of injury, right? So, moreover, what do these sports also share? We have seen that they share the same goal for aerobic preparation, but what are the bases, the physiological basis that can lead us to prescribe more or less the same type of training based in the same type of testing? So I picked some examples in combat sports, team sports, racket sports. Those are all intermittent sports. And I've worked with all of them. And I've applied this knowledge to all of them. So in the graph, you can see many other sports like basketball, boxing, handball, and we have the metabolic ergogenesis. So it means that these sports, they produce energy from all 3 metabolisms, like aerobic metabolism, anaerobic, lactic, and alactic. Of course, they are in different degrees. They are in different degrees, but we can see that all of them share some peculiarities, but they are also targeting these 3 metabolic pathways. And pay really attention to the color code that I use. I use a yellow to distinguish aerobic metabolism and more reddish to depict more alactic. Like when you are, for instance, when you are sprinting, jumping, doing cutting maneuvers, you are close to the 100% there. You are close to using like anaerobic alactic metabolism. And when you are recovering from this type of actions, you are mainly using aerobic metabolisms. Of course, the data there is discretized. During a session, during a game, or during a training session, everything happens in a varying way. Okay, there is a lot of variability. And the question now is how to prescribe training using this information for aerobic prescription. Okay, so here we go. There are 2 main ways to prescribe training for this population of intermittent sports, right? For just to give an example, for continuous sports or cyclic sports like running, swimming, rowing, the main sports, the sports itself is the main method to develop aerobic fitness. Like if you want to improve your running performance, you have to run. But in the other side, in intermittent sports, you have 2 ways. You can do high intensity interval training. That is a more generic way. Like the players, they run back and forth in their playing field. It can be in the soccer court, in the football court, basketball, volleyball court. It doesn't matter. They can do it. And you have also sport-specific drills and games, right? And what's the difference between like one and another? I depicted there sport-specific drills and games. There are 2 players Also, actually, there are four. They are playing 2 against 2, while the others are waiting to play. It's a different way to configure the session. But the main difference here is that high intensity interval training is more predictable. You have control over the parameters. For instance, movement pattern. The movement pattern will be almost the same from the end, from the start to the end of the session. They will be running back and forth in the playing field. The pace will be given by a physical assessment, by a test. Do you remember that 30-15 that I mentioned before? So I'll be teaching you how to use it. And change of direction. Since they are running back and forth, they will be changing direction in a 180 degrees fashion from the start to the end. The work duration, recovery duration, and the work to rest ratio, it will be predetermined. So you know how the athletes are performing. But in the other hand, when you talk about sport-specific drills, it's more unpredictable. It's closer to the actual sport, to their specificity. Movement pattern, you cannot predict, because they will be playing like 2 against 2, 1 against 1. They will be doing games, so you cannot know precisely how they will move. The pace, you can have an idea. You can constrain the task so they move and they have an intensity in a certain way, but for sure it's not predictable. Change of direction, they will be moving in many directions, so also not predictable. Work duration, recovery duration, and work to rest ratio, you have a certain idea. You can constrain these parameters to achieve your goal, to improve performance, but they are not fixed parameters. Okay, moving on with the test. So, okay, I said for high intensity interval training, we need to perform a physical assessment, a physical test. And people are using a lot of yo-yo tests. Like I said, the Indian cricket team, the Indian women's hockey team, Australian football, Singapore's football also. But I want to give you another very good option to test your athletes, and that's the 30-15 intermittent fitness test. How do this test work? Okay, let's say we have here a playing field, right? It can be a soccer field or any other sports, doesn't matter. You need to have maximum 40 meters long playing field, right? 40 meters. And you will divide this playing field into halves, 20-20. And let's position one athlete here in the starting line. He will be running many stages, doing 30 seconds running by 15 seconds rest till the end of the test. That's why the test is called 30-15. And as soon as he runs, the speed will increase gradually. So let's look at this blue athlete. He will run to the end of the court and come back for 30 seconds. After this 30 seconds, he will rest for 15 seconds. The start begins at a velocity of 8 kilometers per hour, as is written here in the court. And for the next stage, the speed will increase 0.5 kilometers per hour. So it will keep increasing every stage, 0.5 kilometers per hour till exhaustion, or till the athlete cannot keep the pace of the test that will be given by a recorded tape, by a beep, by a sound. And down here, I have another example, faster speed, 10 kilometers per hour. The athlete will run 2 full courts and almost half court, 30 seconds, and then rest for 15 seconds. Okay, there is a manual for this test in the mobile app that will be showing you at the end of the presentation. Okay, and I'll be showing you now in practice how this test works. This is a data collection that I did in my master's in performance analysis in Europe, using a gas analyzer to measure oxygen consumption. You can see these areas, they are the markers. Like here, another marker. another marker in which the athlete can synchronize his pace with the beep, with the sound. Okay, moving. Let's say that now we have tested our athlete. What is the outcome of the test? I know this graph looks intimidating, but don't be intimidated. The gray bars, they show every stage that was accomplished by the athlete during the 30-15 test, right? So you see that the intensity is increasing, right? And the white line represents the oxygen consumption. So we can see that it's not continuous, not a straight line. It goes up and down due to the work and rest ratio that there is in the test. And in the end, at the end of the test, there is the final speed. The final speed for this athlete in the test was 16.5 kilometers per hour. And this is extremely important, this intensity, right? Because we'll be using it for prescription. We also have here the velocity associated with maximum oxygen consumption, but we're not gonna use it. I'm just showing it because I was using gas analyzer. You don't need to use gas analyzer. Just you need to do the test. This intensity is not important. And see, do you remember that I said to bear in mind, to pin in the back of your mind, the color code that we used for metabolic ergogenesis when we were talking about the types of intermittent sports? Okay, so here it is, the color code. Let's think that close to 0 kilometers per hour is more aerobic, it's pure aerobic. And as you go up close to a maximum lactic task that is sprinting for 40 meters sprint, let's say, is when the athlete show his maximum anaerobic lactic capacity. So we have all this range of intensities, and the intensity of the 30-15 test, the final velocity, will be right here, more or less, in this mixture of aerobic and anaerobic pathways, right? We also have the difference between the final velocity of the 30-15 test compared with this sprinting test. This is a reserve of velocity that by aerobic means the athlete cannot achieve. But if in a separate test, we can see this anaerobic speed reserve, right? In this case was around 10 kilometers per hour. Okay, so let's write down this data. Let's write down this data and pick the most important data that I told you is the final velocity of the test. And now we can play a bit with prescription. Remember also that I said that very short interval training, like playing with 10 seconds work, 10 seconds rest, is very interesting for intermittent sports. Now I will be picking a slightly bigger example, longer duration is 15 seconds duration for a running exercise, for instance. Now let's pick our athlete and put him to run back and forth like we have seen in the high intensity interval training, the example of the athletes running back and forth, 15 seconds and resting a lot. Let's put 3 minutes rest for those athletes. What is going to happen with oxygen consumption? This white line depicts the maximum oxygen consumption of this athlete, okay? And here we have the maximum sprint speed, just to show how far he is from his maximum sprint speed, right? And here it is the oxygen consumption. We see there is a peak of oxygen consumption after the bout, after 15 seconds, but then it goes down. But I picked only one sort of sports, that is team sports, for this demonstration. Let's say that we have 12 athletes, 12, and we are doing one type of exercise, like in pairs, like, we are doing one type of exercise in pairs. So in the bluish, guys, the bluish guys, they are playing one against one. They are doing the exercise in pairs, while the remainder athletes, they are resting. So we have 2 playing and 10 players resting. It gives us a 1-to-5 ratio, 1-to-5. And you have seen previously, that is a lot, 1-to-5. We want them to work in a 1-to-1, more or less, ratio to improve aerobic capacity. So what do we do with these athletes? We split the team in both ends of the court. And by doing that, we can reduce this ratio to 1-to-2, because we have now 2 players playing and 4 waiting. It means that this 1-to-2 ratio will be respected. Okay, but if we keep splitting the team in different fashions, we can now do a 1-to-1 ratio. For instance, we can, if you have 12 players, you can put 6 at each side of the court, of the playing field, and while 6 are playing, for instance, the other 6 are resting. And when the team that is playing go to rest period, the one that is out of the court comes in, and you keep changing between teams that are practicing. And then we'll finally be working in a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, right? There is a lot to understand and to go deep about interval training, but I try to give an overview and why it is very, very, very important. Of course, if you don't have any fancy tool like GPS or heart rate sensors, you can just sit close to the training field and try to pay attention how long each test takes. Sorry, not each test, each task takes. Because if it takes more or less 15 seconds, or you want to use even longer tasks to build interval training using sport-specific drills, you can do it. You just have to be patient and do some notations to get to know how your sports works, right? And if you want to know more, just please email me, that I'll be answering and happy and guiding you through your main specific sport, right? And as I told you, I want you to, by the end of this talk or the next day or the next week, apply the fitness test. And hopefully there is a mobile application that you can use for it. It's available for iOS or Android. You can download. You can go through the manual to get a better understanding. Do the test, write down the final velocities, and then create your first interval training prescription, working 15 seconds, resting 15 seconds, running back and forth in the playing field. And you just have to pick the velocity of the test that will be in kilometers per hour, transform to meters per second, multiply by 15 seconds, and then we'll get to know what is the distance that athlete will be running in 15 seconds, right? So I know that is a lot, but as I mentioned before, I wanted to be meaningful in my statements, in my words, instead of precise. And if you want to more precise information about your specific sports, just contact me in my email. And I'm really, really thankful for your attention.